All right, so picture this. You're hiking through these beautiful hills in Sardinia,
Ah, Sardinia.
and you stumble on this massive stone tower. It's unlike anything you've ever seen before.
Not Roman.
Not Roman, not Greek, something much older, something way more mysterious.
Okay.
And that's the kind of experience that awaits you when you explore the Nuragic civilization.
Oh, wow.
They built thousands of these towers. They're called Nuragic, across the island of Sardinia during the Bronze Age. And today we're going to take a deep dive into their world, exploring their unique architecture, their artifacts, and their interactions with these powerful empires like the Phoenicians and the Romans.
Well, what I always find fascinating about the Nuragic people is that they left behind these incredible structures. They were part of the Bronze Age world, but they're still shrouded in mystery.
Really?
Yeah, they didn't have a written language, so piecing together their beliefs in daily life it's a puzzle. But that's where archaeology can help us decode the stories hidden within those artifacts and ruins.
And that's what makes this deep dive so exciting. To guide us, we're drawing insights from an interview with Dr. Anastasia Christofoulou. She's a senior curator at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. She put together a fascinating exhibition on ancient Mediterranean island civilizations, including a special focus on Nuragic Sardinia.
Dr. Christopoulos' work really highlights that while these island cultures were distinctive, they weren't isolated. They were very much connected to the wider Mediterranean through trade, migration, cultural exchange.
They were real hubs of activity.
Yes.
Okay, so let's focus on these iconic towers, the Nuragic.
Okay.
These massive dry stone structures. Some are standing alone, others are clustered together, forming these entire settlements. It's kind of like, the Brochs of Scotland, only these predate them by centuries.
Right.
What does that tell us about the Nuragic people?
Well, it shows their ingenuity, their engineering skills. They built these towers without mortar, relying on something called polygonal masonry, where stones of irregular shapes are carefully fitted together. It's a testament to their understanding of structural principles. And what's really interesting is that they weren't just fortresses. Archaeologists think they served many purposes: places of refuge, community centers, and even residences for the elite.
And here's a little something that's kind of spooky. Dr. Christofoulou mentioned that even today, modern Sardinians hold festivals around these ancient towers.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine that connection to the past, spanning millennia?
Wow. Yeah, it's a reminder of the significance of these structures and how they transcend time.
Oh, yeah.
They're woven into the cultural fabric of Sardinia. But before we get into the Bronze Age, it's important to remember that Sardinia has a very long history of human occupation. We're talking about evidence dating back to the Neolithic period, the very beginnings of agriculture and settlements.
So before the Nuragic, there were already people on the island working with pottery and growing crops.
Exactly.
They set the scene for what would become this more complex society during the Bronze Age.
Exactly. And with the Bronze Age, we see the rise of the Nuragic culture and their amazing metalworking skills. There's this one artifact that really captures this, a bronze votive boat. It's in the exhibition.
Oh, I remember seeing that. It's tiny, maybe 6 inches long, but so detailed.
Yes.
You've got the mast, little Nuragic towers around the edge, even tiny birds on top. It's like a snapshot of their world.
Yes.
A glimpse into their seafaring and rituals. What do you think about it?
It's amazing. It gives us so many clues. We know they were involved in the Bronze Age trade networks across the Mediterranean. And one of their biggest exports was copper.
Which brings us to those huge copper oxide ingots. We're talking about massive slabs of copper, each weighing, what, over 60 pounds?
Hey.
They were like the ultimate copper currency back then.
Precisely. These ingots were traded all over the Mediterranean, showing how connected the Nuragic people were to this larger system.
It's fascinating to think, what did they get back for all that copper? What were they bringing into Sardinia?
That's a great question.
Yes.
While we don't have all the answers, it shows how much we still don't know about this civilization.
Right.
Now, the exhibition also has these beautiful bronze figures, often found at Nuragic sanctuaries. Many of them show warriors, archers, even mythical figures. It makes you think they were a very warrior-focused culture. But is that the whole story?
Well, warfare does seem to have been important to them, but there are also figures that show a different side. There's one very moving. It shows a mother mourning her child.
Wow.
It shows that even in a society that may have valued warriors, they also understood loss and grief, the whole range of human emotions.
It's those details that make the past feel more real,
Yes.
These weren't just figures from long ago. They were people with families, feelings, stories, just like us. And it's important to remember these figures were often found in sanctuaries, suggesting they were part of their religious practices. But without written records, we can only guess what their beliefs were, who they worshipped, what their ceremonies were like. It's like we only have a few pieces of a puzzle.
Yeah, we get a peek into their spiritual world, but we don't have the full picture.
Right.
But that's what makes archaeology so fascinating. Always discovering, always interpreting, reinterpreting.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing dialogue with the past, and each new find adds to what we know. But we also can't forget about other groups who interacted with the Nuragic people. Around the first millennium BC, a new group arrived, the Phoenicians.
Ah, the Phoenicians, those incredible seafarers and traders. They set up colonies all around the Mediterranean, including two major ones in Sardinia, Tharos and Nora. What's interesting is when they arrived, it didn't mean the end for the Nuragic culture.
That's right. Instead of a takeover, it seems like there was a time when they lived together. The Nuragic people continued to flourish alongside the Phoenicians, showing how adaptable they were.
Yeah, that says a lot about their strength as a culture. But that doesn't mean their relationship was perfect.
Right.
I mean, there's evidence of potential child sacrifices in some Phoenician sanctuaries. That raises some difficult questions about the impact they might have had on Nuragic society.
It's a reminder that cultural exchange, even when it seems peaceful, can have complications and darker sides.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the whole of history, the good and the bad. But before we get into that, let's just appreciate how resilient the Nuragic people were. They went through so much and kept their identity for centuries.
It shows how adaptable they were. They took in new influences while keeping their core values, but their story takes another turn with the arrival of another powerful empire, the Romans, around the 2nd century BC. The Roman conquest of Sardinia was a big change for the Nuragic people. They lost their independence.
It's kind of sad, a culture that lasted for so long, becoming part of an empire. But even though the Nuragic civilization faded, their legacy lives on in those towers, the artifacts, and the mysteries they left behind.
Exactly. Those things help us understand them, their beliefs, their skills, and how they adapted.
I remember something Dr. Christophilus said that was really interesting. She said, people often think island cultures were isolated, but they were actually very connected to the rest of the world. They were hubs of cultural exchange, influencing and being influenced by history.
Right. It challenges our assumptions about the past. It reminds us that even communities that seem remote were part of the bigger story.
It makes you wonder how many other amazing cultures are out there waiting to be found.
And speaking of things hidden, something that struck me about the Nuragic civilization was that they didn't have a written language. It's amazing they were so advanced in their architecture, metalworking, and social structure without a written form of communication.
It's definitely a puzzle, but we have to remember that written language isn't the only way to pass on knowledge and culture. Oral traditions, rituals, and things like those bronze figures we talked about can also tell stories and preserve memories. Think about those figures. They're like silent storytellers. They give us insights into their beliefs, rituals, and how their society was organized. They say so much without using any words.
Exactly. And the fact that we're still finding new artifacts and trying to understand what they mean shows that the Nuragic civilization is still communicating with us. Their story isn't over.
It's incredible that objects made thousands of years ago can still amaze and intrigue us.
And that's why archaeologists and historians continue to dig and explore. It's not just about finding things, it's about connecting with the people behind those objects. It's about understanding where we come from and appreciating all the different cultures that have shaped our world.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about empires and wars. It's also about the cultures that maybe didn't get as much attention but made their own contributions. The Nuragic civilization is a great example. They did things their own way and left their mark. And they did it while dealing with all the challenges of a changing world, interacting with powerful empires like the Phoenicians and Romans.
Absolutely. They show us that resilience and the ability to adapt are just as important as having a strong military or a powerful economy when it comes to influencing history.
It also shows us the importance of different perspectives. We tend to see history from the point of view of the winners, the ones who wrote things down and built big monuments. But the Nuragic civilization, with their oral traditions and their unique architecture, make us think about other ways of understanding the past.
It makes you wonder how many other stories are out there right in front of us, just waiting to be discovered.
That's what's so great about history and archaeology. It's all about exploring and discovering, trying to put together the pieces of the past to create a more complete and interesting story.
Like a giant puzzle. And each new piece helps us see the picture more clearly.
So what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this deep dive into the Nuragic civilization?
I'd say the main thing is that history is full of surprises. There are so many stories to be told, so many cultures to learn about. The Nuragic civilization, with their mysterious towers, their beautiful artifacts, and the questions they raise, reminds us that the past is much more complex and fascinating than we might think.
Yeah, it really makes you think that the best stories aren't always about those big empires or famous battles.
Right.
Sometimes it's those cultures that we don't hear about as much, the ones who did things their own way and made a difference.
Exactly. And the Nuragic civilization is a perfect example. They were on that island for so long, creating their own traditions, their own way of life, their own understanding of the world.
And they did all of that
Hmm.
while dealing with, well, all the changes going on around them, interacting with empires like the Phoenicians and the Romans. It's a real story of resilience and adapting, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It reminds us that those qualities, resilience and adapting, can be just as important as military power or a strong economy when it comes to shaping history. And it also shows how important perspective is. We often see history from the winner's side, the ones who wrote everything down and built those big monuments. But the Nuragic civilization, with their oral traditions and their unique buildings, they make us think about different ways of understanding the past.
It really does make you wonder how many other amazing cultures are out there waiting to be found, maybe hidden away, just like those Nuragi were for so long.
And that's the beauty of archaeology. It's all about exploring, putting the pieces of the past back together to see a fuller picture of human history. And who knows, maybe one day you, our listener, will make an amazing discovery, your own glimpse into a forgotten world.
That'd be incredible. But until then, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep listening to The Deep Dive. We'll keep bringing you more journeys into those fascinating corners of human history and culture.